All right, remember love and limits from last night? Remember love and limits, which I sort of see as the theme of all parenting? God calls them peace and righteousness. He calls them truth and grace. He calls them Mary and Martha. He says, I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Aren't I a great guy? Next line, you shall have no other gods before me. He's always living in this back and forth ebb and flow of grace and truth. The only begotten of the Father, filled with grace and truth. It's all through Scripture. Psalm 85 talks about this place within the person of God's kingdom where peace and righteousness kiss. And God is always living in these two. And that one of the reasons that Jesus can seem so odd in the New Testament is he flows back and forth between these in such a natural, organic way between love and limits. You know, one minute he says, no, suffer the little children, come under me, and my burden is easy and my yoke is light. And the next line he's like, well, let the dead bury their own dead. Your for us are against us. And it's like, whoa, I thought he was a nice guy. No, he's a limit-setting guy. Wait, which one is he? And he lives in this place, okay? And your parenting is always this, well, how much do we say, oh, baby, I love you and I care and I understand that hurts and I'm so with you. And how much do you go, and if you keep doing this, there's the cost of it. And we live in that tension and that balance. Now, you in your marriage, you probably both tend to err at one side or the other. One of you more limity, one of you more lovey. Most parents are like that. Like I was sort of Captain Von Trapp with my whistle, making them march. And Norm was like, you know, making them close out of the drapes and singing in the bed. You know, it's like. So we're going to talk about the love part of love and limits. We just talked about limits, and we talk about that first because you sort of need the limits to keep the house from being crazy chaos with terrorists with bazookas running around. You need to sort of, nobody's going to get much love in then, all right? So we need to have the limits to create order, to show love. The limits are kind of like that fence around the playground that helps kids have the safety and security to experience the good stuff, all right? But what's the good stuff? You know, show me the love. Where's the love and limits? We're going to talk about that. And it doesn't mean we've gotten to like the touchy-feely group hug portion of our program, okay? When I'm talking about loving and relating to your kids today, I'm not talking about schmoopy. What I want to do is talk to you about how we help develop in them a core sense that I am loved. We've had several questions about kids who feel shame and all that. I want to talk some about how we infuse them with love. That sort of keep you in that we talked about at the marriage conference. Even if you're not engaging me right now the way I wish today, I feel grounded and whole being me. All right? How do we do that? Let me tell you why that's so important. Number one, for them to have that kind of grounding in love is what makes discipline feel safe so they can learn. Remember, the goal of discipline is learning. And as we said, with anger and scary, non-loving interaction, their takeaway is not going to be, I'm really learning something about my choices. Scary, angry, authoritarian, mean discipline just makes kids feel scared or angry. All right? So the loving piece we're going to talk about creates that context where it's like, okay, I'm loved, done deal. Now what am I going to learn? We used to have a little saying in our house, and that was, two things are true. You are unconditionally loved here. Apart from your choices, apart from your actions, you are loved. Apart from what you do. However, point number two, how much you enjoy living here is completely contingent on your actions. Okay? I can love you with all of my heart from jail. You pick, okay? Second reason that this whole love thing's important is, and this is why we're talking about it, is because it answers what I call their core questions. Here's a way I like to frame things. Basic principle, kids, and us to some degree, spend our lives and our relationships, especially kids, asking sort of core questions about life and themselves and relationships from their parents and their inner circle. Overtly, covertly, tacitly, implicitly, out loud, they are asking questions about who they are and about how life works. These almost unspoken questions like, do you want me? Real me? How big a deal is it if I screw up? Give me a vibe for that. I want to kind of judge how big a deal it is by how you relate to me. I have this core question. Do you really want me? Do you care that I'm hurting? Is it okay for me to be strong? What if I disagree with you? Is that safe? And kids are always asking those questions all the time, all right? And they are getting answers to those questions all the time in their relationships with us, okay? You can change the answers, by the way, later on in therapy, but that's a different show. But you have to re-ask the questions. What happens if you don't get a good answer to those questions is you will continue asking them of everybody in your life forever, okay? In other words, I will often ask people, wow, you live kind of worried all the time about everybody else and what they think about you. In other words, they're taking this core question of, do you want real me? And they didn't get a good answer to it. And now they're asking it of everybody, their boss and their spouse and the lady at the Wendy's drive-thru, Felt like she looked at me funny. They're sort of living this life always. So we're asking these questions all the time, and fortunately and unfortunately, we're giving our kids answers to those questions all the time, like no pressure or anything, right? So when we're talking about loving and relating in this talk, we're not talking about family group hug. We're talking about what does it look like to be good and conscious, and how do we unpack what it looks like to give really good, strong answers to these core questions of kids? How do we communicate to a child that you matter? It is good that you're here. We want you, all right? Once they get that, and once they're shown with limits, that they're not, Kanye West or something, that kid's unstoppable, all right? You get that love and limits piece together, all right? So we're not just rolling chicken bones. This is powerful heart juju, all right? So I want you to learn it. I'm going to look at this a little differently than you may hear it looked at. I'm going to gloss over sort of the obvious relationship builders like, spend time with your kids. You can get that anywhere. Boy Scouts, board games, whatever, the basics. I want to go a little bit deeper and ask, as we said last night, what makes love salient and powerful to them in their language? Like we said, kids have a love language too. And relating to kids and teaching them about love is going to be about knowing what that love language is and speaking it back to them. All right, so now before we start this, I want to go ahead and give you this caveat. This does not mean they're not still going to blow us off sometimes. All right? I remember when Callie was about 5, she got a goldfish. She won a goldfish at the fair and named it Goldie. And we got a little fish bowl and some blue rocks, And I walk in there one day and Goldie's floating belly up, man. And I'm like, wow, Goldie's dead. I need to tell Callie because, this is like her first brush with death, y'all. This is an important day. I'm a therapist. And so I go and I knock on the door and she's like coloring in her room. And I'm like, Callie? She's like, yeah. I said, baby, Goldie's dead, honey. And she said, well, flush him down the toilet. And she goes back to her coloring. Okay, yeah, that's what I was going to do. One time, I like to cook, I say, and one time I was walking through the house. I don't know why I had my chef knife, a 10-inch chef knife in my hand, and I turned the corner, and there's little Catherine, probably about 3, in little footy pajamas, looking up at me, and she goes, Daddy, are you going to cut us? I'm like, I'm trying to put those days behind me, baby. Come on, what do you say to that, So, regardless of what we do here in the love category, they're still going to distort us. They're still going to blow us off. Nothing I'm going to teach you is going to make your teenage boy want to plop down in the kitchen with you and go, Mom, let's just talk. That's not going to happen, all right? But they need it from us. So how do we communicate love in their language? It's different for different ages. Let's look at infant. How do we teach love to a squally little baby? In some ways, this is one of the most important ages about love because the answers are so core and so fundamental. But remember we said last night, let's try on what it's like to be them. What's it like to be an infant? Let's get inside their noggin. Well, they need a lot of stuff. They're hungry and thirsty and gassy and poopy. And we used to joke, we'd hear noises down below and we'd go, is it solid, liquid, or gas? Okay, so it's like they have a lot of little problems. They have lots of feelings. Babies have tons of feelings. They get angry and they get scared and they feel lonely. They feel a lot and they don't even understand what it is, much less can do anything about it. But though they're unhappy a lot, here in this moment lies the opportunity to really begin teaching them some cool stuff about the most basic things about love because they've got all these problems, right? But there's this nice lady and her big friend, and they keep coming around and making it better. All right? And so within baby's little world, I keep having these problems and I feel better, but this nice lady and her big friend, they come around and they take care of me, and somehow they make all that bad stuff feel better. I mean, it's like I'm hungry. I'm never going to be fed. There's no food in the universe anymore. It's kind of how babies think. I'm going to just live and feel this way forever. But nice lady and her big friend appear, and they give me something, and I feel better. I remember Whit, when he was a little bitty, it's like he'd be so hungry, and you'd get his bottle, and he'd start it's like you'd see it on his face. It's like, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to, it happened. It's like, it happened again. I can't believe it happened again. All right? In other words, he's learning a basic principle that's foundational at the deepest substrates of love, and that is that the bad can become good again when people are involved in my life. Really? It can? And sometimes there's just this sweet goo-goo and gazing in their eyes, and he begins to learn the first parts of love, which is nurture and trust. And then once that happens enough, it starts to get kind of tattooed on his heart. And that trust piece, it's not just that it's okay now, it's going to be okay. How important is that in love? That is keep you in from the marriage conference. Can I keep and hold on to the fact that even though things aren't good now, they're going to be okay? All right? Love's not going to go away. So as the nice lady and her big friend take care of these basic core needs of basic attending, the baby starts to learn this pattern of it's going to be okay. And then you can see them as they get older, they start seeing you make the bottle and they sort of settle down. They're anticipating good. How wonderful. All right? Now, usually this is about, empty tummies and dirty britches. But sometimes something else happens for a baby, and that is everything's kind of okay, but the nice lady and her big friend just hold him and goo-goo him and gaze in his eyes, and there's this soft, wonderful bonding, what the textbooks call mother-child reverie, of just you and me, eye contact. And he starts to get this nice, weird feeling that I'm with, that we're one, that there's belonging, that people feel good. It's not just that food feels good, people feel good. And I start to get that deeply inside of me. So second love language for infants is that bonding, connection, belonging. This is hardwired in humans. There's a ton of research on infant development in the early 20th century and the basic bonding and attachment stuff. And they're talking about how core that is, as core as wanting food. Remember the Harlow's monkeys? And they'd rather hang on to the soft monkey mama who didn't have milk than the wire monkey mama who did have milk. In other words, that's how important the connection is. I remember when Callie was in utero, we called her Pee-wee. We didn't know who male or female, so we just called her Pee-wee. And I would tap on Norma's tummy and go, "Hello, Pee-wee," and we'd talk to her as she grew. And then she was born in California. Our doctor was a California OB. He had a red Porsche with a license plate that said Stork 1. It's like having Tony Stark as your OB. It's kind of weird. But anyway, so she's screaming and squalling and red, and they clean her up, and she's screaming, and they hand her to me, and I said, "Hello, Pee-wee. Welcome to life." And she went, all right, they're hardwired for that. She already recognized my voice, and it immediately comforted her. All right. On the other hand, I was holding a little baby boy a while back, and he is just eye contact, me, connection, and I'm like, "Hey, man, hey," and we're having the sweetest little time, and all of a sudden his eyes rolled back in his head, and he fell asleep, and I went, "Oh my gosh, he just fell asleep. We were having this moment. He's just gone." And his mother from across the room says, "Welcome to what it's like to be in a relationship with a man." I thought we were having a sweet moment. You're like, "Oh." Okay, so 2 ways that babies learn about love is that attending and that bonding thing, okay? And here's what I want you to get. When you do this stuff, you're not just dealing with the baby. You are building core layers of love substrate down in the bottom basement of this, all right? You're laying software. I joke with parents that 0 to 18 months, we basically teach kids that, yeah, the world does completely revolve around you. And then from 18 months to 18 years, we basically say that I was just kidding. It doesn't revolve around you, okay? We undo all of that, all right? A couple of things about that, by the way. Don't let all that perfect attending stuff spook you. A lot of parents are like, who get really into the bonding thing. It's like, oh, we can never let them cry because it'll mess up their fundamental attachment. No, Remember, good enough. Good parents and kids work out kind of an ebb and flow. Oh my gosh, she needs to sleep in our bed and, always be, family together. No, we're also building independence. All right, so you'll find that balance, all right? Now, number 2, how do you show love to a toddler? Well, you can start by not locking them in their room and drinking Chardonnay out of a sippy cup at 10 a.m. That's a good start, all right? I want you to commit to that this week, okay? But let's put it this way. What can a toddler do that an infant can't do? Almost everything, okay? In other words, what we add to this story is, a lot of things stay the same. Toddlers still need a lot of nurture and a lot of bonding and a lot of connection and a lot of that sweet comfort. But all of a sudden, for them, all that oneness can get a little bit boring, and they start realizing there's a whole world out there, and a whole cabinet full of Tupperware to pull out, and cabinets and pots and pans, and they start saying no and me and mine, and they start developing some mastery and some sense of them. And as we said last night, that's a bad thing in that, our studies are telling us that relationships are always more difficult with two people in them. So all of a sudden you have somebody who will fight you, but also we have the beginning of a person here. But think about it. This is exhilarating to them. Get inside their skin. You've only been an infant your whole life. Here's my grandson, Whit. I just took this video, and I just love it. Watch him. You've only been an infant your whole life, right? And all of a sudden, you can sit up and take the spoons and throw them. Look, do it again. It's like being Harry Potter. Like, bah! All he's ever been is a baby on his back. Bah! I mean, it's like, Wingardium Leviosa. It's like, that's what I'm looking for. Anyway, look at that. Now get inside this little universe for a second. That's exhilarating. Like, can you believe it? That's why they love to toddle around, and that's why they're getting into everything, because it's literally like if I gave you a wand, and you can conjure anything you want. This is just amazing. Selma Hayek wrote a book about this age and called it the magic years, because for them it's like, bah. All right? Now, that's leading us to our point. How do we show love to a toddler? Well, we're still doing snuggles and cuddles and all that kind of stuff of nurture, like a baby. One of the things that you'll see with a toddler is they'll be big and independent and walk away from you, and then all of a sudden they'll come running back and like pat your knee. The French therapists call that rapprochement. In other words, the reapproachment. And with a toddler, they're practicing. I'm going to go be separate from you, and I'm going to come back. And that's our job to be available. That sweet mom or dad who goes, yeah, hey, come here, climb up my lap. And they're going, no. And they're off again. And we live in that ambivalence. It's a lot like having a teenager, okay? Seriously, we'll talk about that in a minute. Same dynamics. So they still need the nurture, but we're going to add two things. We are going to, at the same time, learn to celebrate all their new little abilities and set limits on their new little abilities at the same time, okay? Number one, celebrate their abilities. We need to have a category for sort of getting excited about the new them. Even though they're now, terrible twos or terrible threes, they're making your life more difficult. What's behind that is the development of a person, remember? And we need to not fall into the authoritarian trap of thinking that's just their little willful sin nature, shaking his fist at God and parent, that little covenant breaker. And we need to bring that under authority. Well, that's exactly one half true, okay? But what I don't want us to miss here is this is also the beginning of a person. I've seen a lot of doormats in therapy who never learned this, all right? They never learned to have a sense of self and be me. So that's why it's one of our 7, being strong and having identity. So this is the toddler days is where that starts. So one of the things that I want you to do regarding celebrating is I do want you to look for the opportunities like I did that day playing with Whit. And yeah, I had to clean up the spoons, okay? It was worth it for me. Look for times when it's fun and safe for them to assert themselves and be strong and you get excited about it. I want you to say the opposite of the runaway bunny. When they say, I'm going to run away from you, I want you to go, yeah, if you run away from me, then I'll jump up and down and clap and throw a party and have little drinks with umbrellas and stuff because you're so big and awesome. Go, all right? Runaway Bunny is great for infants. For toddlers, it's like, no, I want independence, all right? Callie separated early, and she was born in California, as I told you. And I remember we were on a picnic once when she was about 8 months old. We were in this park in L.A., and I turned around, and she had crawled off the blanket and was crawling away across the park in L.A. She was about as far away as I am from the door to the sanctuary. And, I'm like, oh, my gosh, where is she going? And she rolls back on her little haunches, and you can't hear her because of the ambient noise in the city. But you can see her shoulders shaking. She's laughing just in glorious autonomy, And I'm like, okay, hope you make it in Hollywood, whatever. And then we go get her. But there's this moment of celebration as we get excited with them, all right? Huge love language for toddlers, that you understand that piece of their world. They're also looking into our eyes, answering this core question about their independence. What if they mess up? I have a friend whose little 3.5-year-old broke his phone on his screen. And he said, I picked up the phone and it was broken, and I looked in his eyes, and he looked in my eyes, and they were just terrified. Like, oh my gosh, what is Daddy going to do? And he said, I really sort of backed off, and I thought, and I said, it's okay, we make mistakes. In other words, you're going to go make adventures in this world, and sometimes you're going to break stuff. I got room for that. What a beautiful engagement of the risk that comes with autonomy, all right? Huge way that a toddler looks at stuff and feels love, that sort of celebrating of their abilities. And it's good for them to go ahead and get that done now, so they don't have to grow up and be looking for it with look at me with my Porsche and my hair implants and whatever, Go ahead and get that out of the way now. Now, as you can imagine, all of their antics cannot be responded to with that much enthusiasm, all right? Like, oh, look, you're drinking water out of the toilet. That's awesome. It's organic, like composting, cool. Or you hit your brother so well, he'll be out for hours, It's better than a nap. That's not going to help anybody, all right? So we also show love. Remember, love and limits. We show love with a toddler by also not just embracing and getting excited about their abilities, but by setting limits on their new little abilities at the same time. So we pop that leg when they run in the street. I caught Callie once filing index cards in the little opening of the VCR. Remember, I was a parent in the 80s. So it's like a mail slot. If you think about it, she kind of was on track. She had stuffed it completely, just socked full of index cards, all right? So we sort of had to set limits on some of this stuff they're doing. Let's talk about anger real quick here, because as they start to engage life like this, and as we need to set limits on it, and as we're thinking about love, and this is applicable to every age, be aware of the love undoers. The Hall of Famers there being anger, shame, jerkiness, okay? So if we're thinking about putting love in the plus column, let's also just touch base with the minus column of the ways in which all of us can be jerky and shamey to our kids. Like, oh my gosh, and they can feel that from us. Be aware of that. I got a teenage client half a year or so ago, and his father would scream and yell at him and call him a stupid idiot if he lost a basketball game. And the kid said it doesn't bother him. It doesn't bother me. I kind of actually deserve to be taught like that the way I played, okay? And he talks a good game, but he's super insecure and he struggles with his friends, okay? Fun for the whole family. So none of us want to act that way, right? But we do, right? So what do we do if we do act angry, shamey, jerky? Remember, we were here last night. Only thing better than a perfect parent is a humble parent. We swing back in and redeem it, okay? Remember the principle you only learn through an event? That applies to us too. I have a dad I'm working with now who's like a hotshot surgeon in town, but he rages at his kids. And he's talked to me about how he wants to stop. And I'm like, good. If we ever want to stop any out-of-control behavior, be it raging or shopping or porn or overeating or alcohol or any out-of-control behavior, you got to have two things. You got to understand the heart. What's driving this? What's behind his anger? What's behind my addiction? But if that's all you do, you'll just have a very insightful, nurtured porn addict, Okay? So you got to do step number 2, which is there needs to be a literal consequence to the choice. It has to cost them something directly. I was trying to lose some weight earlier in the year, and I wrote a note to myself in my phone that if I cheat on my diet in any way, I lose electronics for that day. And I swear that's the only reason I got through it, because I had a structure there. Now, if you can't obey your own structure, guess what? You need somebody else's structure, okay? You get the model? So anyway, this surgeon is like, I keep yelling at my kids. So I said, you really want to stop? He said, yeah. I said, okay, make it cost you something. So now what he does is when he's rageful to his boys, he does their chores for a week. So he's like getting up early before he gets in the Beamer and his scrubs, and he's rolling the garbage to the street and all that because of his rage. Now, what do you think that says to his boys? Dang. Repentance is everybody's love language, all right? All right, so with toddlers, we put things in the plus column with 2 things. Let's say it a different way. We delight in their strength, and we set limits on their strength. We help them learn the freedom and the safety to say no sometimes. You get a voice. But we're also going to teach them to learn to hear no, all at the same time, all right? School age, how do we show love? Well, we're still going to bond and nurture. We're always going to do that. They need that closeness. We're going to mirror and embrace them. Look, Ma, no hands. Look at you. You hit that baseball real good. We do that. That's legit. We're always going to set limits. That's from now on. But we're also going to add 2 new concepts. In school age, you see 2 new things happening. Number 1, these are their first forays in life outside the family. Like they're going to school, they're interacting with teachers, they're interacting with other kids, they're doing baseball and, sports, and they're going to need help with that. They're going to need a power source for that. They're going to need us to stand behind them in that. And secondly, they're really making sense of how unideal things are. Remember, these are our 4th and 5th of our 7 group, of our 7 points. How do I help you build strength, and how do I help you make sense of yuck in life? Here we go, Space Rangers. We're about to talk about them in more detail. And I want you to sort of know how to engage them. Secondly, they're really tuning into how unideal things are, the yuck in life, okay? Think about the things your school-age kid complains about. The thingies in my soup, his piece is bigger. I hate our minivan. We have too much homework. Is this sounding familiar? Right, they're talking about how unideal things are. They really tune into that and get some real words for that. So they're going to need some help and nurture in managing all that yuck and disappointment, okay? So 2 things they need to scratch that love itch. Number 1, we're going to empower them as they start to engage life, help them be strong, and we're going to do empathy with them as they make sense of the pain in life. So, empathy and empowerment, next time on Dr. Phil. I mean, I get it. They sound psychobabble, all right? But notice the love and limits theme again. The empowerment is that limits, pushing them. The empathy is the loving thing, nurturing. The love and limits piece is all through here. So let's look at empowering. We touched on it last night. I want to develop it a little bit more. This is where we teach them, again, teach. This is about teaching children that they are strong enough to face life's challenges. A lot of kids do not know this, all right? They're facing life outside the family for the first time, and things are challenging. And sometimes we need to say and teach, hey, buddy, I got some breaking news for you. Guess what? You can handle this. You are strong enough to. I'm going to help you. We're going to do this together. I know you can. Let me show you. Let's go. And we empower them. Basic principle, as I said last night, kids get their view of themselves and of their world from the eyes of their parents and mentors and inner circle. They're kind of looking at us going, do you think I can do this? Okay? We get our view of the world from the eyes of our parents. Little fun story that relates tangentially to this. Rick Bragg, y'all's very own Alabama writer. You know Rick Bragg? Okay. I had the privilege of having a little bit of a relationship with him, which I treasure. But he told me once, he said, we were driving down the highway, my dad was driving, and my mama was in the front seat, me and my brother were in the back seat, and my daddy was going like a bat out of hell, driving full tilt buggy down the road. And my mama looks at him and goes, Jimmy, you're going to kill us all. Which, of course, was terrifying to me, given that I had never known my mama to lie. We get our view of our world from the eyes of our parents. Get it? All right. Anyway, so school-age kids really need our help in learning to be strong. You will get opportunities to do this. As we said last night, around 8, 9, or 10, something shifts for kids. Let me put it this way. If a 5-year-old comes to you and says, I'm afraid a tornado's going to hit the house, you can go, no, baby, tornado's not going to hit the house. And most 5-year-olds are going to go, okay. A 9-year-old says, I'm afraid a tornado's going to hit the house. You're going to go, no, tornado's not going to hit the house. He's going to go, well, I just saw Jim Cantori on TV standing in front of a house that had gotten hit by, okay? And you will find these problems hard to solve. Now, the reason you will find them hard to solve with love and nurture and reassurance is that you can't solve them with more nurture and love and reassurance. You have to solve them with strength and pushing that child to be strong. I know you're scared of the weather, and I know you're scared of hurricanes or tornadoes or whatever. I know you're strong enough to manage this fear and hold on to our love and trust God and tell that fear to push back. And you're strong enough to do this, okay? In other words, that's the time to push your child to be strong. Like these examples with people who've talked about a child who's sort of down on themselves. Notice I haven't said, well, you need to have an affirmation time, every day to tell them that they're good and wonderful and loved. That has not been the direction I've taken. My gut has said these kids need to be pushed to be strong and push back, okay? So, what do we do if we're always rescuing them? What are our eyes telling them? We're telling them, like, you're just little and fragile and can't handle things, and we'll buy you a special weather radio. Right? Now, what message are my eyes sending them at that point? Right? I don't want to send that message. I was talking to a mom once, and she had been talking to the school counselor about whether to hold her child back or not. And she said, I just want to make sure that she does not struggle in any way. I'm like, wow, what is the message that's sending that little girl, you know? I see a lot of kids who've been helped so much and protected so much that they have no idea that they're strong enough to manage real life. Their parents have always prepared the road for them, not them for the road. It's sort of like if your child was insulated from all bacteria, they'd never develop an immune system. And actually, doctors are beginning to condemn those antibacterial goos, like Purell or whatever, because they're seeing kids literally not develop immune systems. They're saying these kids need to go out and, eat dirt, and eat that gum from under the table at Applebee's, whatever. They just need to get some of those varmints inside, out there. So same thing happens with our emotional world is I don't want to protect them from yuck and pain. I want to engage it. I was guilty of this myself. We're all guilty of this. Bonnie, again, when she was at home with us as a teenager, she was writing a paper for Nathan Devine. Isn't that a great English teacher name, Nathan Devine? Like somebody in a Jane Eyre book. Anyway, he's very hard. And Bonnie is a terrible writer. And so she's asking me for help. I was an English major, all right? So I'm looking at this paper, and this is a dog rug, man. I wouldn't let my dog sleep on this paper. It was terribly written. So she and I are working, and finally I said, and I've told school leaders this, I came out and came forth. I finally just said, just go to bed. I'm going to write your paper. Okay? I did it. So she goes to bed, and I'm an English major. I've read the book. I wrote the paper. Okay? Just get this done. Anyway, she turns it in. About 2 weeks later, she comes in the house, and she goes, hey, Dad, I got your Divine paper back. Your Divine paper. And she said, he gave you a C. What? A C? I'm calling him. No way. I worked all night on that paper, and I was an English major. I've never made a C in English in my life. I made straight A's in English. Are you kidding me? I was outraged. And just to make it worse, Norma was mad at me because Bonnie needed a good grade. Like, for real? What do you mean you made a C? You could have pulled a grade out. All right. Better story. Some friends of mine in Nashville had a little 7-year-old boy, and they'd gone to a game at the Bridgestone Arena with the big high escalators, and he gets the escalators. He's like, I don't want to go. I don't want to go. Let's take the elevator. And they used that opportunity. They said, well, that would be really easy, but what would our eyes be telling him? Yeah, you need an elevator. You can't ride the escalator like big people. So we slowed it down, they said. And we stood at the escalator and said, I'll tell you what, let's wait. Let's watch people ride down and see what it's like. And let's watch them get to the bottom. Look, there they go. And there's some more people. Let's watch them. Let's take our time. I tell you what, we'll hold your hand when we get on. We'll do this together. And then when we get to the bottom, we'll have a big party and celebration that you did it. So let's push back on your fear and handle this. And their eyes are saying, you're strong enough to do this with us. And they did it. And they rode down. They got to the bottom, and they did an end-zone dance and all this. And what did that teach that child? Look for those opportunities. That is love language to a school-age kid, all right? So they want more ketchup at McDonald's. I'm going to go, okay, well, why don't you go ask the lady? No, I'm scared. All right, why don't I go with you, and I'll watch you ask the lady? No, I'm scared. All right, how about I go with you and I ask the lady and you watch. And then next time you ask. And you start working with this mentality that one of the things we want to do is to teach them that they're strong. That is so loving, all right? So we look for those strengths. Now, again, blind spots, remember, from last night? If your 9-year-old is the head of the local Yakuza clan at school, he doesn't need more empowerment, all right? Now, empathy, as we said last night, talking about the whole issue of life is difficult and painful, how do we engage them in pain? Wait, I never gave that slide, sorry. How do we engage them in pain? We talked a little about coming alongside last night. I want to go in a little more detail about what that looks like. Where should we be with someone else, your child, when they're in pain? Here's my model. You remember it from the parenting conference, because this is applicable to your marriage. This is applicable to your friends. This is applicable to your children. 3 places we can be with somebody's pain. Number 1, we can blow it off. Number 2, we can try to fix it. Or number 3, we can learn what it means to be with someone. Blow off is where they encounter yuck and difficulty and pain, and we're like, oh my gosh, you can't cry about everything. Come on. Or as one of my clients' dads said, get a grip, it's not that bad. All right, that was their orientation toward pain. Sort of starving kids in Africa kind of stuff, right? This is where our orientation is basically, I'm going to sort of deny that there's real pain, and I don't want to hear it, and I'm going to push yours away. Now, this kind of denies that there's pain and denies that at some point your kids are going to face pain, and when they do, it's going to feel bad to them. Now, wouldn't it be nice if the first time through in their pain they could deal with it with us? So, number 1, let's don't deny it. Number 2 is fix. And this is kind of the Southern specialty. Y'all know this one. This is where we swoop in there like that good Southern mom and daddy, and we make it all better, baby. Nobody's going to hurt my little angel. He's an angel. Okay? In other words, they have some trouble, and we swoop in there to fix any problem that they have. So we're solving their homework problems, and we're off to Walmart in the middle of the night to buy styrofoam planets and poster board because they forgot the science fair project and all that. All their friends are spending the night, and they weren't invited. And so we're like, well, I tell you what we're going to do. We're just going to pack up and go to Atlanta for the weekend. Show those kids what a good time is. And go to that Coke Museum and Falcons game and see that aquarium. We'll show them. And you're like rescuing them from those problems, all right? That's the fixers. So it doesn't blow them off, but it basically prevents them from ever having to engage the yuck because somebody's always swooped in and made it better. And this is a love talk, right? Blow off and fix keep you from ever actually suffering in the midst of pain with your child. And this is a talk on intimacy and love. What's more loving and connecting than suffering together? You want to be really bonded? Suffer together. The rats on a sinking ship, band of brothers kind of thing, all right? Okay, so door number 3 is with. This is about connection and love and presence. As we said last night, pain itself doesn't harm children. Unresolved pain harms children. Pain that's not connected to. All right? Think about it. With. We mentioned this the last conference. With is God's favorite preposition. Go read the Bible. Walk through the valley of shadow of death. I will make it all better. No, I'll be with you. Emmanuel, God with us. Lo, I'll be with you always, even until the end of the age. God is about with. And I don't even understand why it works, but there's something wonderful and spooky and bizarre and beautiful about how if my pain encounters another person and you are with me, I get it and I try it on and I care, something about that makes it better. So if we can say to our kids, oh my gosh, I totally remember how that felt. That reminds me, I remember this girl in junior high broke up with me, and I was crying. And my parents came and just sat with me in my room, and I was crying. And I remember my dad was standing right in front of me, and my mom was sitting next to me. And they were just holding me and with me in this first rejection, you know. And I remember overhearing my mom say to my dad about the girlfriend. I heard her say, I wish I could just turn her across my knee. Thanks, Mom. That was with. They didn't fix it. They didn't blow it off. They were with me, okay? So, the goal is not to protect your children from suffering. It's to help them learn to suffer well in the presence of love. That's how it works. That's God talking, all right? I told you Callie was diabetic. She was diagnosed when she was 13. It was really a terrifying experience. And I remember being in the room that a day or two later, and, you know, her safety had been restored, and she was okay, and they were telling us about insulin and the whole thing. We were shooting practice shots in oranges and trying to learn how to do all this, and looking at lists of, you know, what foods have the most sugar and carbs, and it was scary. Would she ever eat donuts again? We didn't know the answer to these questions. But I remember we all three were sitting on the bed, and we each took Callie's hand, and we said, you know, you'll never go through this alone. She's 32. We will always walk it with you. And life will give you chances to be with like that, unfortunately. Don't miss them. Norma's going through the Visa bill this week, and she said, what's this charge for $586 from so-and-so? And I said, I know what that is. They've just gotten a new technology that will tell you your blood sugar without having to prick your finger. It just connects to your skin. And she'll never have to prick her finger again. You want $580 for that? You got it. We promised that when she was 13. So, you will get those chances, all right? Basic principle of the galaxy: with heals pain. I don't know why. Now, blind spots again. If you have that Desdemona child who every little skint knee is, you know, Nagasaki, you can't live your life doing empathy and with her. That'd take all day, you know. My bandana reminds me, I've always carried these. My middle child was my most histrionic, and I was disciplining her once, and she was crying about it. And somehow there was a bandana laying nearby, and she's like, can I use this to dry my tears? And I'm like, knock yourself out, Slick. Whatever, you know, floats your boat, you know. So that kid needs more than empowerment, all right? You can handle this. All right, teenagers. How do you show love to them? So many of y'all are teenager parents. I'm glad to talk directly to y'all some. Showing love to a teenager is where it gets most complicated. You know the old analogy that teenagers are like cats and little kids are like dogs? Okay, so you walk in your house with little kids, and it's like a dog. They come running to the back door and like want to jump up on you and, you know, get you to pick them up and throw them up in the air and play with you and all that. And then one day your sweet little puppy dog turns into a big surly cat. And now you walk in from work and they're just like, you know, they keep going. And they wander upstairs and they, you know, you serve them dinner and they kind of look at it and turn up their nose and knock it away and walk away. And, you know, 30 minutes later, the Domino's guy's at the front door and you're like, who ordered Domino's, you know? Anyway, the dog and cat. So here's today's brain teaser. How do you show love to a kid whose job it is to get away from you? In other words, why are they such pills? Because they're all about separating and leaving and becoming adults who aren't your little kid anymore. All right? Babies say, I'm one with mommy. Toddlers say, I'm two with mommy. School-age kids say, I'm one with our family. Teenagers go, I'm two with our family. All right? So the dynamic is the same. And teenagers are separating from family and identity because they're trying to create a sense of self apart from you, okay? Now, a couple of ways that we do this, primarily by deparenting. Remember our three categories. We're at the deparenting stage, and one of the ways we're going to show love to teenagers has to do with deparenting. How do we do that? Well, as we mentioned on last night, one of the keys here is, remember I said we show love to kids by relating to them not just as an authority, but as a person? That's huge with teenagers. And let me explain some of what I mean. Okay. One of the ways we're going to do that is to learn what it means to talk with them, not just talk to them. One of my teen clients actually gave me this category. He said, I like talking to you, man. You don't just talk to me, you talk with me. I'm like, dude, I'm stealing that, okay? Think about it. This is how it works. Regarding authority, one of the things we need to be able to do in life is I need to be able to function over other people in authority. Like I'm doing that right now. I am over you. I'm saying, wait, no, we're going to talk about this now, all right? Now, this is what you do at work. This is what you do with little kids. You're the boss. They are not, all right? And we have to parent from under authority, all right? I totally lost myself in my notes. Because they're out of order. That's it. Okay. We need to understand what it means to be under authority, too. In other words, cop pulls you over, you pull over. You know, Martin tells me to stop at noon, I'll stop at noon, all right? And little kids kind of do what you say. So we bend the knee, okay? That's easy. Sometimes we're over in authority, sometimes we're under in authority. But here's the key. We also need to be able to function as neither. In other words, one place I am regarding authority is no place. I'm neither over you or under you. Think about it like this. Right now, I am over you in authority. I'm telling you my points. All right? But wouldn't it be weird if I stayed in that role? And we left here today, and instead of going, hey, guys, like, what's the best way to get to Mountain Brook from here? Instead, I was like, I noticed that you parked like so-and-so. I've got 3 points on that. You know, wouldn't that be weird? You know, in other words, you step out of here and you lay down that role as authority. I'm just a dude out there, no experts, okay? So here's the key. When we're parenting teenagers, we need to remember this. We parent littles from the over position only, all right? No cat, you can't put the cat in the bathtub, all right? We're not really going to discuss that. But with teenagers, we parent from the over and the neither position at the same time. It's a little like patting your head and rubbing your stomach, okay? And what does that sound like? It sounds like talking with. What that means today is I'm going to learn how to talk to them not just as a parent, but also as a person. One of the biggest mistakes I see parents of teenagers making is parenting their teenager from the above-only position only. That's what we say, and that's final. And your teenager will go compliant, rebel, or sneak lickety-split if you do that, okay? So we've got to treat them in a way that says, I'm not just over you, I'm also with you, and we both matter here. So we're going to keep the limits, but we also, to show love to a teen, are going to add that human-to-human element. Huge love language for teens. What does it sound like? Talk with. They say, I hate school, right? Now, the authoritarian over parent is going to go, well, then I hope you like being a garbage man one day, because that's what you're going to be if you don't buckle down, okay? Now, the both with, talk with parent, the one who's to show love, is going to go, you know, I was in school for like 29 years. I get it. I hated it. I'm happy every day when I wake up and I don't have to go to school. What do you hate about it? Tell me. Anything you like about it? All right? I'm going to talk with. Tell me when you started hating it. What do you wish you could do? I want to get to know you. Treat them like a person. If you told me I hated my job, I wouldn't say, well, too bad for you. You better keep doing it. You're going to lose that mortgage. I don't talk like that to you. I go, really? What do you hate about it? God stinks. I go, how long have you hated it? I'm going to treat you like a person. You want to show love to a teenager, we create a category of treating them like a person. Now, don't panic. We're going to do both. I'm going to say, wow, I get it. You hate school. I care. I'm also going to say, and by the way, if you flunk that test this weekend, you don't go to the game. All right? We're not abdicating authority here. We're just adding the talk with piece. all right? So they come in and go, I've gotten into rap music, you know. The knucklehead authoritarian parent's going to go, oh my gosh, with all those filthy lyrics, I want to wash that little Wayne's mouth out with soap, you know. Now, to the degree you do that, he's going to come back tomorrow with a flat bill and gold chains and his pants down around his hips, you know, like that. That's where this is going, all right? And parents go, we don't understand why he's so rebellious. You and little Wayne can figure it out. The talk with both parent goes, really, rap music? I don't know a lot about that. Like, who's the best rapper? Can you make your whole car go, okay? I want to get to know, make me a CD. And, by the way, if the lyrics get a little nasty, we're going to need to set some limits on it. You know, maybe we'll have to get you into Lecrae, you know. But reach a win-win here, okay? But people often, to the degree you engage your child like that, he's going to be wanting your Chris Stapleton soon, all right? That sort of power struggle with teenagers of not making room for them is a lot of the reason they're jerks. We'll talk more about that in a second. But sometimes when parents will say, why won't my teenager talk to me? It's because once you get to know the situation, they're more wanting to talk to than talk with. I had a mom actually ask me in a group, why won't my son talk to me? I'm like I knew him or something. I don't know. I mean, I didn't know what to say. So I said, well, what did you want to talk to him about? She said, I want to know what he's doing so I know he's not acting up. And I'm like, well, I wouldn't want to talk to you about that. I don't know about your son, but, All right. Secret of the universe with teens. Your teen will listen to you regarding obedience about to the same degree that you listen to them about their hearts. All right? You can't have one without the other. That's love for a teen. That shows them the same thing that rocking that little baby showed that baby. All right? Now, talking with not just two. We're treating them like a person. Huge love language. Next love language for teens, and we'll wrap up, is loving, looking for, embracing their attempts at separateness whenever possible. Doesn't this sound familiar? Just like what we talked about with toddlers. Look for the little actions of independence you can accept and accept them. Toddlers and teenagers are exactly the same dynamic. Only one of them can drive. All right? They both throw tantrums. They both say no, me, and mine all the time. Same dynamic. Okay? They just got bigger weapons. But anyway, they're all about separating. Think about it. They're all about getting their own life. That's why they want to be different from you and want space from you. That's why they're humiliated if their friends see you with them at the mall. Or why the worst thing in the world you could do to them is make them come downstairs and play Monopoly with you and their 8-year-old sister. Why don't you just make them drink molten lead and be merciful about it, Come on. This is why they're like, oh my gosh, you're so retarded. This is why they're like that. This is why their friends are so important. Don't let that freak you out. All they want to do is be with their friends. They don't want to sit with you in church anymore. Cool. I divided it up for mine. I said every other Sunday you can sit with friends. Other Sundays you sit with us. I'll work with you here. You're a person, okay? Look for the kind of separateness you can embrace and embrace it. But their friends are their new support group. And that's how we move to adulthood. I mean, we're each other's friends, right? We're each other's closest connections as adults, right? I mean, don't you think it would be weird if I said to y'all, my mom's my best friend, y'all. It's awesome. Sweet. And you go, yeah, we've read Tennessee Williams, Dr. Cox, but okay. So anyway, they're practicing to be adults and separate kind of, okay, who am I? What do I want? And by the way, if they aren't doing that, we got a different problem. You can ask me about it. You don't want a compliant teenager. Anyway, more on that if you want. But one of the ways we show love for them is look for the many ways we can embrace their separateness as possible and accept them. Now, there's 3 big fat reasons I'm telling you that. Number 1, it feels profoundly loving to them for you to not be in conflict about their separation. You're welcoming them to the adult club. You know how teenagers, there's always that year in which the teenager slides over to the adult table after Thanksgiving dinner. They've been sitting with the kids. All of a sudden you look at me, it's like, look, William's here. Oh, my gosh. And he's kind of part of the adult group. Nobody really says anything, but he's kind of in the club. You're sort of welcoming them to the club, okay? That's the first reason. It feels very loving. Secondly, if you don't embrace their separateness, consider the alternatives. The alternative is your 38-year-old son down on the couch in the bonus room saying, hey, Mom, we got any more Hot Pockets? Okay, that's your alternative, okay? The goal is to get rid of them. And number 3 reason we're going to look for the ones we can embrace and embrace them is because they can make this harder if they need to. Let me tell you what I mean by that. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way. It goes like this. Having a teen is kind of like being carjacked, all right? You're sitting in your car and some guy dunk, 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 taps on the window with a gun. Now, this guy can take your wallet. This guy can kill you and take your wallet. This guy can kill you and take your wallet and take your car, all right? If all he wants is your wallet, give it to him. You're the luckiest person in town, all right? Your teenager will separate, hopefully. How hard that is has a lot to do with how much you work with them. It's the people who fight the carjacker that get killed. The people who blow up and say, Mom wanted to call me John or Papa Shrink sometimes. Like Papa Smurf, but Papa Shrink, okay? I'm like, if that's all you need to be sassy and separate, where do I sign? I want to lock in at that rate. When I'm going to get a stud, I'm like, yes, it's the parents who blow up and go, that's disrespectful. You'll call me father. Those are the guys whose kids shave their heads, all right? They can take this as far as they want. This is a carjacking, remember? All right? They say, I want to paint my room, work with them, stretch. I want to go to the Bama game with my friends, stretch. The theme is look for the ones we can embrace and embrace them. Why don't we do this? Couple of reasons. Is it scary? Being the parent of a teenager is scary. Some of the most difficult clients in my office are parents of teenagers. I mean, I like those same people as clients. I like them in a marriage therapy. But you put them in there as parents of a teenager, and they're crazy because this teenager has the weapons of the universe to destroy their lives, and it's really frightening. Manage that fear. Fear is your enemy as the parent of a teenager. Why? Because being afraid as the parent of a teenager will make you more controlling. You'll be more tightly gripping. And the kids who have the most controlling parents tend to be the kids who make the most and the stupidest choices. So anxiety and kids' stupidity as teenagers kind of rolls in this nasty cycle, okay? So beware of fear. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hatred. Hatred leads to suffering. Secondly, it's sad. Teenagehood is sad. If you do a good job at it, it will break your heart because they do want to sit with their friends at church. And you got these sort of, needy, connecting moms who don't ever want to let the baby go, and you got problems. Go ahead and let them go. A couple of reasons for that. You'll develop a nice ebb and flow. To the degree that you let them go, they'll plop back on your bed at 11:30 just when you really want to go to sleep and want to talk for 2.5 hours. And I'm like, I thought you hated our guts. What, And all of a sudden they're back, It'll start that ebb and flow. To the degree that you're letting them go, they'll swing back. It also makes a good pattern for adult relationships with them, which I'm enjoying now. But it is sad, and that grieving will be your last greatest gift to them as a parent, your sadness about that. Well, Callie went to TCU in Fort Worth, and she was our first one to go to college, And I cried all the way home I was probably Shreveport before I stopped crying, It's like I grieved the whole way. We were actually, during the first semester of her freshman year, we were at home. Literally, we were watching baby videos of her and crying. And she called us. And Norma's like, it's Callie. I'm like, okay. Pause it. She's like, what are y'all doing? And we're like, nothing. We're not doing anything. It's like, put out the cigarette, quick. Yeah. Okay, y'all okay? You don't sound good. No, we're good. We're good. We're watching a sad show. That was it. Okay. So, that's it. We'll stop and do some questions. Remember this. Parenting is fundamentally a relationship, not a task. That's been my theme. I tell people all the time that therapy is basically just a strategic form of relationship. And parenting is too. It is a strategic form of relationship. A style of relating to another person that has a consciousness in it. I am doing this because of that. My goal this weekend is to give you the that's, the understanding of why, okay? And when we fail, join the party. One more Callie story, and we'll do some Q&A. Callie, as I told you, is a therapist. One weekend last year, I was doing a parenting conference in Raleigh, North Carolina, and she was doing a conference for moms of Camp DeSoto girls up at Camp DeSoto. I know y'all know Camp DeSoto. This is Birmingham. Anyway, so she's doing this parenting conference for the moms of Camp DeSoto girls, teenagers mostly, at the same time. So I get back from my conference, and I'm like, well, how did your conference go? It was kind of cute. And she said, oh, my gosh, moms of teenage girls are so anxious. I'm like, well, yeah, it's kind of scary. And she said, well, I mean, I finally just got fed up. I mean, one of them asked me this question. It was like they're so full of anxiety. And I just finally said, look, my dad is a parenting expert. In fact, I grew up with him as a parenting expert. And right now, he is in North Carolina getting paid thousands of dollars to teach people how to parent. And I still needed therapy. So let it go. I'm like, you go, girl. I'll help pay for your therapy. All the ways I screwed you up. All right. Let's work. By the way, my website's up there. There's lots of other talks on lots of different topics on that website if you want them. And like a bunch of sermons I've preached and just various junk if you want to go hang out there.
This goes back to the event stuff from the beginning. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, anything.
Okay.
Oh, and by the way, tomorrow during Q&A between the churches, we're just going to play Stump the Chump. I mean, bring questions about depression or anxiety or OCD or, marriage, or just tell your friends we're just going to play, any topics game.
Okay, I like and agree, all that with all the event, but say I'm asking for a friend. Sometimes when the event is given.
Oh, this is that kids only learn from an event point?
Yes, correct,
yeah, okay,
sorry.
Right. I'm with you.
The crying and gnashing of teeth that comes after that, maybe it's not given correctly or whatever, like possibly would keep me from wanting to give the event.
Yeah. Can y'all hear?
So can you address, I know.
Can y'all hear?
Can you address that?
Get it closer. No, I don't know your question yet.
Okay.
Just speak in the mic better.
Here,
Yeah. I think what you're saying is when there's the event or the
consequence falls.
The need to apply the consequence, that the response is difficult to deal with. And so I think what you're asking is because it's so difficult, you tend to not want to
and
do
it.
And
how's it difficult?
is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay.
We all imitate it, like here on the floor? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, come on.
So it makes me not
What do they do?
necessarily. Oh,
Talk in the mic.
You
Talk in the mic.
no, please don't. Please let me keep it. Whatever.
Yeah.
Happens to be that particular thing. So it would make me shy away from. It would make me want to go soft.
Okay, I get that.
Trying to avoid.
Because you're being held hostage by a terrorist.
Right, and then there's the heavy and the soft, and
Right. Okay. So the question.
knowing it's the best thing.
The question is twofold in the sense of A, what do you do when they pitch such a fit? But right, and the other side is the whole issue of how it creates that dynamic in you of not wanting to do it. Right?
Even though I know it's the best thing.
There is a sense. I wasn't joking about the terrorist, because there is a sense in which they are creating a little scenario to sort of punish you for disciplining them, which is going to make you less likely to want to do it. All right? In other words, it's sort of like do what I say or the kid dies. Okay? In other words, back off or I'm going to pitch a big, loud, scary fit that's going to be really miserable and obnoxious and make you feel bad and all that. All right? I love the way you're putting it, because you're talking about a level of consciousness in yourself of, hey, wow, interesting, that does hook me and keeps me from wanting to do it. It is very important that you push back on that. It is very important that you ask yourself and look at what are the parts of me that don't like conflict. Let's put it that way. Don't like someone being upset at me. We will parent our children, a lot of us will parent our children according to the same dynamic of how we related to our parents. Try that on. It's kind of backwards. why is our generation of parents reluctant to discipline their children? I'm not talking about y'all anymore. I'm kind of going off on this a little bit. Well, the generation that raised my generation, the greatest generation, typically parented out of shame. They didn't say, go clean your room or I'll clean it and put it in the Sunday box. They said, I can't believe we bought you this nice room and these nice things and you're not more responsible with them. In other words, they would shame us, okay? So one of the things we learned was that you obey in order to keep this person from being upset at you. Okay? So, now, our generation grows up and has children, and what do? We raise the millennials. I want to relate to you in a way that keeps you from being upset at me. So you have a dance party, a dance recital tonight. I'm going to not miss it. I'm going to no way I'll miss any of your games because I don't want you to be hurt like the kids in the movies whose dads are too busy to come to their games. I'm going to make sure you feel like you are really loved. And I'm going to bring big thing of roses, even though you're 5 years old in the ballerina troupe, And I'm going to live my life trying to make you feel good about yourself because that's what I learned. That's what I do. I make immature people not be upset at me. I did it with my parents, and now I'm doing it with you. And that's what my generation of parents did. But all of us as parents need to ask this question of what do I do with their displeasure? Now, I want to bring that to my own growth people and say, what do I need to do and where do I need to grow to say, yeah, let's do love and limits. Yeah, it does stink, and I know it makes you really unhappy. And I actually have room for you to cry and pitch a fit for a minute if you need to. And when you're done, you need to give me a timeout. And you stand your ground. The heart response there is to look at the part of you that can learn to feel loved and strong and whole, even if they're that displeased, and not be held hostage by it. The parenting part of you needs to sort of, in a loving way, acknowledge it. Yeah, I know. You're pitching a fit, and it's terrible, and I know you don't want this. But limit, you need to do it. And so you stand your ground. Is that getting to some of your question? Okay, good. Yes, sir. Oh, thank you.
You spoke about relating to pain and being with and not the dismissal or not the coddling side of it. Kind of speak to, if you would, that child that just everything's Nagasaki. At what point do you look at him and go, okay, suck it up, buttercup, it's time to get over it?
How old?
I would say early teens at this point for me, but I'm sure there's everybody dealing with it with different ages depending on the child.
Yeah, I'm going to start with yours and generalize it, but male or female?
Girl.
Okay, teenage girl.
Mm-hmm.
Has she always been histrionic?
Occasionally, but not. I mean, you want to be with them. I'm just from my standpoint, it's like acknowledge it, understand it, deal with it. But at some point, it's like, okay, you can't let it control you and you can't let it rule you. It's time to suck it up and move on.
What does mom do with it?
Sarah. We've got one daughter that tends to be a little more emotional about things.
Right.
Overall.
What does mom do with it?
You tell me.
If you don't want to, if you want him to be the talker and you don't want to engage, that's cool. I don't want to put you on the spot.
I don't notice it as much now as we did years ago. So I don't know.
All right,
It's not as often.
Since it's a little vague, let me just make some principles out of it. All right. With a histrionic child, we're going to go back to love and limits again. Okay. The love is going to say, "Oh, baby, I get it. I understand. I so get it. That does feel so bad. Nothing feels worse than that." You're going to be empathetic. All right. Now, if they stay in that position with a smaller child who wants to throw a tantrum, or like this group back here who we were just talking about, who make you pay with all of their emotions for your intervention, I'm going to say, yeah, and I really care and know you're having a fit, and it really does feel terrible that you're going to miss your game because you hit your brother. And if they keep on going, tantrum keeps going and the mood keeps going, I'm going to set a limit. Love and limits. The limit's going to be sort of like, tell you what, you're really still kind of carrying the banner of this game you're missing, and you're sort of letting that just define the family this afternoon. And I need you to kind of not do that. In fact, what I think I'm going to ask you to do is to go to timeout and sort of work on what it is you need to sort of get grounded again. And if you need loving, that's cool. If you need sort of to pull it together on your own, that's cool. But I'm not really going to let you out of timeout until you found a little bit more grounding. Now, what we're doing there is some emotional, remember category number 6 of managing emotional world. If I don't have somebody help contain that emotion, wrap arms around it, and sort of set some limits on it, with some people with some wiring, emotion will just take over everything. Thus, that histrionic style. And emotion will define their world. And the only way to get that out is for someone outside of them to set a limit on it in the context of love. So I'm going to say, yeah, we care, we get it, you're really upset, and I want you to go to timeout until you can stop doing this to the family. Now, with a teenage girl, I'm going to be a little more gentle, and it's why I asked Mom what she does, because with a teenager, remember we have that person-to-person piece of I want to talk to them and go, baby, I've really seen some things really get under your skin, and it feels like wounds you really deeply. You want to talk about that? Or talk to some of our youth leader people about that? Or I want to help your heart there, and I want to try to see if I can engage her in any way, if she would talk. Let's say she's a talker, then I want to approach her peer-to-peer and go, those kind of things really do hurt. What do you think you need in order to sort of get more grounded? And I will start talking to her like I would an adult who's got the stewardship of managing my own emotional world, and sort of welcome her to that club. So, yeah, there's this little dance between embracing it and hearing it and setting a limit on it ultimately. Limits are as important in managing emotion as empathy is. You just got to sort of time them right. If all you do is show empathy to a histrionic person, their emotions will run the day. There needs to be some containment, like a limit set on what they do with it. And that can even, with younger kids, be discipline. Like if you continue to act on your emotion, there'll be consequences for it. That actually helps a kid metabolize their emotional world. Yes. Both of y'all have asked a question before. Anybody who's not asked a question? Okay. Yeah.
So say you have a 7-year-old girl that you have seen is kind of that blow up, and you maybe have blown it off, and you're noticing that she's now not pulling it up. How do you then re-engage in this new idea that I'm not naturally empathetic, but how do you, I'm sure we've all messed it up. How do you then go back and start in a new way?
Let's make sure you've messed it up. Is she showing any negative fruit?
She's starting to just shut down a little bit.
Okay.
Like with trying to get anything out of her, not wanting to, or she'll be really hurt and leave if we're trying to discuss anything. And I think some of it is because I've just told her it's fine, get over it. I'm just kind of
Okay. So you are seeing a little bit of fruit from that.
Yeah.
That's a question I always ask regarding children. Is children, since their emotions tend to become events or things in their lives, it's easy to tell if a child has problems. People will say, we're getting a divorce and we want our child to come see you. I'm like, why? And they're like, because we're getting a divorce. I'm like, yeah, but why? What's the problem? And they're like, well, there aren't any problems. In other words, children are like shrimp. How do you know when shrimp are done? They turn pink. It's easy. I don't know if the shrimp are done or not. Well, yeah, you do. That's right there. Children are like that. If they have trouble, they will manifest a fruit. They will be curt. They'll be angry. They'll wet the bed. They'll do something. Remember, they do their feelings. So it makes it easy to diagnose a child because you don't have to sit around like you would with an adult and say, I don't know if she's depressed or not. If a child's depressed, you will know it. All right. So that's why I asked you about the fruit. I'm just making that point for the rest of y'all. So you're seeing her be a little bit distant. I would look for the times in which you can sense that that compassion would be appropriate and surprise her. In other words, is as easy as, how was your day at school? And she goes, oh, no, it was okay. Go, well, I'm glad it was okay. My My day was kind of okay too. Though I did have something that felt bad to me. So-and-so happened. But anyway, anything feel bad to you? No. You go, okay. Do let me know if there ever is. I want to try to really do better about hearing you and caring about you there. Or is that kind of swinging like that? Yeah. Will you pass that down?
So we have a 13-year-old daughter on the spectrum, an 11-year-old son, a 4-year-old, well, almost 5-year-old son. So I could ask a lot of questions, but I'll give you a specific one that we're currently faced with. 13-year-old has a real problem with bad language right now. Kind of curses like a sailor most of the time.
Trouble with what?
Bad language.
Okay.
A lot. So what would be a good logical consequence?
And you said this
She's on the spectrum.
on the spectrum.
Autism spectrum. Mm-hmm. So a good
Like
logical.
you mean kind of Aspergery?
Yes, very high functioning, but
Right.
probably more on that end.
Okay. Do y'all know what spectrum means? Okay, good.
Yes, most everybody in here knows her.
Okay. It's a girl.
It's a girl, yeah.
Okay.
So that's one part of the question is we're out of ideas as far as how to try to get her to stop doing that particular thing. But then on the flip side, and then with our 11-year-old son, he's close enough in age that we can reason with him. We get that he knows that he shouldn't model what she does. They've grown up together. But then with the little one, he is repeating and modeling what she's doing. And how do we, with a little one, go, hey, you see what she's doing, and it's not okay for you to do it, even though we can't control her? Did you hear that question? See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think I got it.
Okay.
In other words, your question ultimately is not so much about the 13-year-old on the spectrum. It's about how to manage
A
the
4-year-old.
younger one vis-a-vis her.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. So it would be wise to have somebody who was very professionally and intimately involved with her to give you guidance and counsel there, just because some of the rules change with the spectrum dynamic. So let me ask you this. Regarding the younger one, what, 10 boy?
11 and 4.
11-year-old boy, and then does the 4-year-old push back too?
Oh, for sure.
Interesting. All right, so what kind of stuff do they say?
Well,
That's not fair, you don't do that with her, that kind of stuff?
a little bit. I mean, with the 11-year-old, I can, I'll say, yeah, it's not fair, but God made her brain different, and I'm sorry, that was.
But that's their pushback, kind of a.
Pushback a little
Okay.
bit. But he's my compliant one. The
Right.
4 or 5-year-old, we're not there yet with that discussion.
Right, yeah.
And so I'm like, hey, you know what? I'm not okay with my 4-year-old saying crappity crap, crap, crap. Or worse.
Right.
And so but for his concrete brain to say, hey, you can't say that. And he's like, but my sister's saying that, and you're not doing anything about that.
I have a friend in St. Louis who uses language like that and tells her children, that's mommy language and you can't use it. Yeah. When you're a mommy, you can use language like that, but not now. Anyway, let me try to address your question. That's not fair is a fascinating statement. And here's what's behind it. When a child lives out of that comeback, that's not fair, you didn't do it for her. What they're saying tacitly and implicitly is, I don't know if you know this or not, Mom, but there is an authority in this house that's greater than you, and it's called fairness. I'm appealing to the Constitution, which is bigger than you. In other words, you don't get a right to parent me out of your own authority because you need to bend the knee to fairness. All right? So I want to give that little or no credence. I want to briefly acknowledge it with the love thing, like, I get it, that feels unfair. But I'm going to parent you in the best way that I think, and I care if that doesn't feel good. Secondly, with a child, especially the older they are, teenagers especially, they're going to play that card all the time. That's not fair, but you said you don't do this with him, and they do all those kind of things. Now, basic secret there is that I will not respond to that because it is not a dialogue. It is not an objection. It is a weapon. In other words, this is not an actual appeal to an interaction about the fairness of this engagement. This is a weapon to try to win. Now, one of the ways I intervene with that with teenagers is I say, tell you what, that's really important to me. Like if, it feels unfair that he never has to do this and you always have to do this. And yet I'm not willing to talk to you about it now in the heat of this moment as we're having this conflict. But I'll tell you what I will do. Someday when we're not having conflict, when I'm like, cooking dinner, having a glass of wine, waiting on your dad to come home, why don't you come in the kitchen and plop down on a stool and sit down with me and talk to me about your feelings about fairness and unfairness in our family. I'll talk to you about it all night long. And you know what? He never, ever will do that. Because it's not a real dialogue. He's not interested in solving the problem. It's a weapon. Okay? So with a teenager, call their bluff and go, great, let's talk about it. But not as a weapon to use against me and to persuade me to not do what you want me to do. You don't want me to do right now. We're not going to do that. But I will engage you in a literal dialogue about it if you want. And they never will. Because it's not a dialogue. They're not interested in fairness. They just want to win. But regarding your question specifically, I want to say, yeah, I get it, that it feels unfair, and I care. But this is still what your dad and I think is the best thing. And I care that it feels unfair. And at some point, I'll be glad to talk to you more about why. I've told you why before, and you still come back to the unfairness. So I'm sensing this really isn't about your question about the fairness. It's about you don't want to be disciplined. That'll be how I'd orient it.
We have twin, almost 15-year-old boys. And when talking with them about something that they've done, typically they're right there together. And if we're getting onto one of them, instead of them listening, it immediately becomes, but he. And they'll do that not just with each other, but also, well, you should see kids at my school.
But what?
You should see what kids at my school do.
In other words, this is nothing compared to
Right.
that. Right.
They seem unable or unwilling to take any responsibility for their own actions. How do you...
Can you give me an example of the kind of actions we're talking about?
It's never anything really bad. I just, it's kind of the whole deparenting thing. I want them to be functioning adults. And so I will talk to them about, the way you, just them getting onto each other. They're ugly to each other a lot.
Okay.
And I'll say, it's really not your job to tell him what he just did wrong. That's my job.
Okay. That's a fun one to play with. What kind of disciplines do y'all use?
Missing out on desserts, missing out on a TV show, missing out on, they're very driven by food because they're teenage boys, so missing out on some kind of fun food or getting to go out to eat.
Okay.
Having to go to bed earlier. They don't have electronics.
Okay.
We're one of those weird families.
No, that's great. I like, as y'all have heard me reference, I like electronic discipline. Besides, it sounds cool. Initiate the electronic discipline. Okay, so let's just play with it from the sibling perspective. That's fine, because we need to talk about siblings. Siblings that are fighting, siblings that are in conflict, siblings that are blaming each other. That's kind of what they do. Well, one of the ways I like to look at the whole sibling issue is that there's a real value to it, if in no other way, in that it is the best on-the-job preparation you could ever get for being married. Because here's this person, and you love them, but you can't stand them sometimes, and they're not going anywhere, and you got to make it work, and you disagree with them all the time, and they take your stuff, and, you threw that away, and I was trying to save it, and, it's being married, Now what they'll want to do is to use you as, the court-appointed attorney, and you're supposed to resolve these things, and I used to say to mine, well, I got a striped shirt and a whistle, I'm not the ref here, okay? Though a client of mine used to be a federal attorney in D.C., and she quit it all to be, a mom and has 3 boys, and they're all teenagers. And they'll come to her, and they'll they'll say, well, he did this and I did not. And what she does is she bills them. She said, I used to do this and get paid a lot of money for it. So you guys scrape up about $100 and I'll hear your case. And so like, okay. And they come up with money, and she'll hear the case. But other than that, she goes, I did this in D.C. for a lot of money. I'm not going to do it for free here. One of the things I want to say to siblings is, and we can vary this a little bit if there's a bully victim issue going on, but the beginning point with siblings is I want to say, look, you guys are going to need to make sense of life together and adulthood, as you're saying. And here's the deal. You guys need to work it out in a way that's somehow satisfactory to both of you, or you're both losing out to dinner tonight. That way I'm sure to get the guilty one, or you guys can work it out. Now what you're doing is you're putting them in the same position that marriage will, and they have to kind of work on it. You guys need to share the, Xbox, or I'm shutting it off and nobody gets to use it. As a general theme, I want to put them in the position of you both have to work it out. Right? Now that is helpful to them. They basically can say, okay, I hate you and you hate me, but let's work this out. And that's kind of a relatively adaptive solution. Now, parents will often then say, yeah, but I have one who's compliant and he'll always be the one to go, okay, well, fine, you use it. And that'll always be the solution. Right? With a oppressed dynamic, with a bully victim, to be a little bit more harsh about it. With a bully victim interaction, I want to address both sides of it. In other words, if you have one kid, one sibling who's always winning, always pushing the other one around, our default mode would be to think we need to push back on the bully and tell him to stop treating his brother like that. Okay, and that's half the story, but you will never ultimately solve the problem unless you also ask the question of how do we empower the younger one or the victim, sometimes the older one. In my family, my middle child got bullied by the younger child, and we had to kind of empower her, and she was always going, even when Bonnie was the littlest, even when Bonnie was a baby, she picked on Catherine. Catherine came upstairs at like about age 5 going, Bonnie called me a baby. And we go downstairs and there's Bonnie sitting in her high chair, swinging her legs going, baby. Like that. See? Anyway, so we had to sort of empower Catherine like, you're going to need to handle this. We're not going to run to your rescue all the time. So with a bully victim style with the siblings, I want dad to talk to the victim sibling and go, look, pal, we're going to talk to your brother and we're going to tell him he can't push you around like this. But I'm talking to you and saying, I want you punching back. And I'm giving you a temporary 00 license to kill. You get a chance, you push back, you solve this problem, you start to develop some mojo, and we'll revoke the 00 license to kill at that point. But I want you to have some pushback. I want your bully brother to realize this is not going to be easy. I tell kids all the time, the only way to lose with a bully is not to fight. If you fight with a bully and win, you win. If you fight with a bully and lose, you win. Because what bullies are looking for is somebody to make them feel bigger because I can make you feel smaller. And if that person fights back at all, it throws all of their little chemistry off, and it doesn't work for a bully anymore. They'll move on to somebody else to pick on. All right? So the victim's role in a bully scenario is huge. Opposite your marriages. Some of y'all are in marriages in which one person's just a controlling, angry one, and you don't want to upset them. And you'll come to talk to me in therapy and go, he's so mean, and I can't believe what he said. And my question to them is, what do you say back? Where's your power back? And the person in the victim position holds a ton of power in terms of resolving a situation like that. So I sort of took your story all over the place. But the answer to your question is about putting them on the same team. You guys need to work this out or else. What he did so-and-so. Okay, good. I'm not judge and jury. You guys are going to figure that out. And try to push back on that and make them have to handle it. What about the heart of the bully? How do you teach them not to be that way? Let's start with this. First question God asks when he meets anybody is, are they repentant or unrepentant? Okay? In other words, what do repentant people need? Repentant people say, I'm screwed up and broken and my heart needs help. And what we give repentant people is kindness and love and warmth and nurture and restoration and healing and forgiveness and all those goodies. And that helps us grow. And truth, wisdom. What does an unrepentant person need to become a repentant person? All right? And usually God does that with limits. Now, the question that people often ask about an acting out, destructive, hurtful person, be it somebody who's a drunk or somebody who's a bully or somebody who's a critical shrew, husband can't do anything good enough. The question people always ask is, what's going on for them? Why would somebody treat someone that way? And our inclination with a jerk or a bully or an acting out person is to ask questions about their heart. How do you change the heart of a bully? Now, that can be a little misleading because though the heart is important, you can't answer that question about the heart with an acting out person, with an unrepentant person. The first question you have to ask with an acting out person, a bully, a jerk, an addict, whatever, is how do we set enough limits on this to make them so miserable that they stop? That's my only question. My question isn't, why is it that they love drinking more than they love their family? The question is, what treatment center are we going to get them shipped off to? Okay? In other words, the first question is not about their hearts because they're not asking questions about their hearts. The first question is how to turn them into a repentant person. I tell the spouses of jerky, bully spouses, I'm not even going to talk to you about what might be going on for him. What I want you to do is to become such a Jedi at setting limits on him that he becomes so miserable that he puts his head in his hands and shakes his head and goes, oh my, why would I do that? What is wrong with my heart? I want him to be so unhappy that he's asking that question. And the moment he starts to ask that question, then something can be done about it. So, to answer your question and not answer it, to change your question, the question is how do we stop a bully? How do we make him have to pay enough for his crimes that he starts to wake up and go, you know what, if my acting out behavior is shut down and I can't beat up on someone else, what happens is all that crummy junk that I feel about myself that I dump on that little victim lives inside of me and I start to feel bad. Whenever acting out people are restrained from acting out, they start to feel that junk inside of them and they get unhappy. Okay? That's what we're looking for. I worked in an adolescent unit in California when I was in school, and we'd get these teenagers in, and they were like burning down the school and, selling drugs and beating people up and all that. In other words, they were acting out. Now, as long as you act out on a feeling, you never feel it. So we could put them in the hospital and lock them down, and they couldn't do all their junk anymore, and they would start to cry. They'd get depressed. Now we can help them. Okay? So the step one with an acting out jerky person is to shut them down. And at that point, they will ask you, what can we do to help my heart? Because they'll be so unhappy. Our job, ironically, like God's, is to make them unhappy. I do want to give other people another chance. Anybody else? She's going for 3. Yep, okay.
This might be quick.
All right.
You were an
Don't need to
English
be quick.
major. We all like stories. Do you have any novels that you feel like have some good parenting characters in them?
Literature?
Literature.
Oh, interesting. I've never thought of that. Usually what I read is as far from psychology as possible. I don't know. Anybody? No good parent figures in books? Movies? Atticus Finch. That's a good one. Good Alabama example, too. Yeah. See, because you should have gotten the mic all along. See? That's cool. Any other kind of question? If anybody thinks of one, let him know. That's fun. All right.
So this is going back to how our parents parented our generation.
Like what I was saying in the windowsill?
Yes, over in the windowsill.
Yeah.
When you have, so I was raised by very authoritarian parents, do this or else. And so when we try to act out on this, the empathy, when we try to play golf, the grandparents demand to see a tennis match, if that makes sense.
And how are the grandparents getting involved in this? They're
So,
visiting for the weekend?
yeah, visiting, or they live out of town, and so it tends to be long chunks of time. And if we are playing golf, they get the tennis ball out, and we'll move in and try to correct, because we're not, they're not seeing the long game. They want to watch somebody win, if that makes sense. Yeah. So how do you, then it becomes a power struggle, 2-3 generations in. So I asked Jason if that was a worthwhile question for the group, and he said yes.
That's a super question. Let's see. Well, one layer of the question is that it's always a productive subject to reflect on of what would it look like for you as an adult to alpha your parents.
Are you wanting me to answer that question?
No. But I think it's fundamental to becoming a whole adult. As Tyler Durden says, who do you want to fight? My dad, right? In other words, I think the whole question of, can I reach back into that dynamic of my parents tell me what to do and what I'm doing is wrong, and speak it back and kind of go, you know what, Mom, this is the way we want to parent, and I can really get that it makes you unhappy, but this is really how we want to handle this. And I appreciate your advice, but I don't think that's how we're going to do it. And deal with her disappointment or her scolding or her authoritarianism or whatever. As an adult, you can talk to your therapist about this. As an adult, that's be a hugely life-giving thing for you to do. And it might even help your parents grow. I really recommend that. Secondly, don't worry too much about grandparents, y'all. Grandparents, in regard to the heart and character and soul of a child, grandparents are like a hotel. In other words, some grandparents are like the Four Seasons Laguna Niguel, all right? And it's like, they're people with you're walking around in robes and they give you slippers and stuff. This is awesome. I never want to leave here. And then what happens? You go home, right? Or grandparents can be like the stay-in I stayed at in Sardis, Mississippi once, that the air conditioner was underneath the window, and whenever it cut on in the middle of the night, the fan hit this thing, so it go ding, 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 all night long until you started going to sleep, and then it go ding, 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 And I did that all night, okay? Now, that's really terrible, but then I got to go home. In other words, grandparents are like a hotel. And sometimes grandparents are just crazy and stupid and wanting to play tennis and messing everything up. And worst case scenario, don't worry too much about it, because worst case scenario, it's a hotel. That's not what changes you. That's not what forms you. Home is what forms you. So even if the grandparents are taking them out, they're teaching our kids to be spoiled. They're buying them everything they want. No, they're not. They're just the Laguna Niguel, right? Or they're shaming our children. No, they're not. It's not the same. I remember my dad could be real shamey and all that. And I remember one of my children, I was at my parents' house with one of my children. We live in the same city. And I saw my dad do his junk to my daughter. And I came across the table, man, And I said, no, John, just wait. You're not sure about this. You're projecting how you would feel. We don't know how Catherine feels. Why don't you ask her? So we get in the car to go home, and I said, I noticed that interaction between you and Grandpa. What did you think of that? And she said, oh, Grandpa's so funny. All right? She's got home. Home's inside of her. So Grandpa can be a jerk and it doesn't get through. All right? So we don't need to worry too much about grandparents. But I still like the idea of playing around with alphaing the grandparents. I thought you wanted it, boss. Okay. All right. Hey, Wally.
Well, just like a theoretical question, I guess.
All right.
I mean, ultimately, it's in this might, I think it embraces everything you're saying, but ultimately, don't we want our children to end up doing what we want them to do just because they love us? Love be the final, actual realization, motivation, I guess. Not that that negates anything you're saying, but I mean, it's not just they face consequences, which surely is true, but ultimately you want them to realize that these are the issues of relationship that you'd want to do this just because you love me. Yeah. Ideally, that's really ideal, but I was thinking, would you agree with that?
Not only do I agree with it, but I think I ought to stick it in this conference better. I think it's a cool point. It's a beautiful point, a sweet point. What we would have to think about is how could we also tweak the material to talk a little more directly about how you help develop that ability? Because I would think that is the fruit of an enormous amount of growth. Think about any relationship you have. You remember the thing in the marriage conference that the resolution of a conflict is a win-win? Remember? I matter and you matter. But if you're really whole, if you're really full, if your heart's really overflowing, you can do a win-lose. You get to win and I'll lose. I'll lose this one for you because I love you and I want you to have that. Now, you have to have a pretty dang full heart to lose. Greater love has no man than this, that he gives up his life for his friends. In other words, that kind of loss, if you're being a good steward of your life, you've got to be careful about living in a loser position. But if your heart's very full, then you can live in a position that says, I want to do something, bend the knee, something I don't want, simply because it is loving to you. So, what we do with children is we move from the concrete to the abstract. We move from the tangible to the lofty. And so we begin by saying, if you don't do this, you lose TV. And as they learn to develop an appreciation and a valuing of wisdom and choices and choosing well, they'll then do it out of wisdom and because it leads to good things. And then they'll do it because they respect authority and because my parent is an authority and I've been in the need of that as a right thing. It feels right. And then I will be able to do it simply because I feel full enough and strong enough to give up something I want because I love you. And I think a lot of what the Holy Spirit works in our hearts to cultivate is obedience. God often says, if you do this, you will die, But ultimately, I think what he wants is for us to say, I will forsake this pleasure for the greater pleasure of pleasing you. So there's this, that's at the, I don't really know if there is anything more rich and full and mature than that. So that's kind of the end. When you reach there, you can die, all right? Or most of us will never reach there, but in the twinkling of an eye, when we see his face, all of a sudden we'll get what Wally is saying, But I love that piece. And thinking about how we would cultivate that sort of heart in them. I think it would be the end result of a lot of good things. And good humility out of us, because we would model it. They could catch it from us like a cold.
So we have a 9, almost 10-year-old boy who is absent-minded. So thinking about the context of we are trying to prepare him for adult reality. Oftentimes his disobedience, hey, go upstairs and brush your teeth. His disobedience in daily life is the result of absent-mindedness and not defiance. And so we sometimes find it hard to discern how to address that. You can be an absent-minded adult and get audited by the IRS and be in big trouble because you forgot to pay your taxes. Do you see my question? Is there a nuance in handling and addressing non-defiant disobedience in a developmentally able child?
Is this across the board? He's absent-minded in everything he does?
Yeah.
Does he have any feelings about it?
He gets frustrated with it, and so we've taken the approach of, I was so clear. I asked you to come up and do one thing and you didn't do it. And I can't just let that go.
So we have to correct that and talk about that and discipline that. And I get that you didn't do it on purpose, but I can't let you just not ever obey. You got to learn to listen. That's my current approach, but I wonder, I would love to.
Has it cost him much in reality yet? Like, I have a kid right now in my practice who's a senior high guy, and he's was in the school play, the high school production. It's a big deal, and he would forget his pants, and it was just a disaster for him, and it was incredibly motivating because he's and then his mom got the question of well, should I get in the car and drive his pants to him? Because the whole show is going to be different because he's going to be wearing weird pants. Or no pants. That'd really be weird, So he's running into things in reality that are spanking him. Has he run into any reality?
A little bit, coaches, why didn't you bring your soccer ball? Well, I left it in my dad's car. So there's a little bit of that. But I want to help him be able to suffer some of those consequences in a safe place, too.
How's he do academically?
Capable, but sometimes struggles because of that. I didn't hear the teachers say that. I don't know. I didn't, just sort of his mind is in another place.
You said something like who's otherwise developmentally something, like you've done testing or?
Well, I guess I just mean age-wise. I'm not asking a 2-year-old to go up and do 6 things. It's a 10-year-old to go up and do 1 thing. So
right.
My assumption is that the developmental.
Would you be interested in ruling out something like ADD?
We're kind of thinking about that. His teachers are like, no, he doesn't have ADD because he's not disruptive. And yet, what I mean?
He completes his work, he's focused?
No.
Okay. I want to ask that question. Now, ADD is an interesting dynamic, and I am not the expert on it, but I am curious about it. And I see it a lot, and I believe in it. There are different things that can cause ADD. Saying you have ADD to me is like saying you have a runny nose. I could have a runny nose because I have a cold. I could have a runny nose because you just punched me in the nose. I have a runny nose because I'm allergic. I could have a runny nose because I smell pepper. In other words, I could have a lot of reasons to have a runny nose. And people say ADD, but usually what they mean is one thing. There is a kind of ADD that is about the executive functioning part of my brain. In other words, the music conductor who's got all of the orchestra there, and he's directing the flow, and he wants more woodwinds. And it's the part of me now that's sitting here talking to you and looks outside and sees those little new green leaves on the plants and goes, oh, man, those are going to get just frozen to death in 2 days. And it goes, whoa, come back. You're talking. You're talking to Elizabeth. Come back. Now, all that happens in a split second, right? Well, with ADD people, that part of them's lazy. And he doesn't really tune into the fact that you're now looking at the plants and thinking about the freeze coming. And he's asleep. That's why we give ADD kids a stimulant. I always wondered why you give a hyperactive ADD kid a stimulant. Well, it's because you want to wake up the conductor so he's like, oh, okay, I'm on task. So a lot of times forgetful kids live in a distracted manner. And I don't know, do you feel like there are any emotional dynamics for him? How's he manage his emotional world?
Not great. He suffers with frustration. He's the Nagasaki. He's not a fit pitcher, but he's a crier.
Right.
He struggles to manage his emotions.
Another thing that could cause ADD besides just that, usually when people say they have ADD and you need medication, what they're meaning is that everybody who has ADD is because their music conductor's asleep. No, you can also have ADD because you're histrionic. In other words, a lot of people are ADD because they have trouble controlling their impulses. Now, somebody controlling my impulses is exactly the same as somebody controlling my emotion. So that's why I asked, is he emotional? Is he his emotions? And there she says it. The emotions are a little bit kind of run the show. In other words, there's not a cognitive structure on the thinking that organizes it. All right? So that same exact thing would happen with his impulses, which means he goes upstairs to brush his teeth, but he sees that somebody left the TV on, and he walks in and he sees what's on TV, and now he's interested in it. And there's
Legos.
Huh?
Legos.
Now there's nobody running this circus who goes, oh, wait. we're going to manage your impulses. You don't get to go watch TV right now. You need to brush your teeth, like you said. Okay, so that executive functioning piece is present everywhere. What do y'all do with his emotional world when he is histrionic?
A little bit of everything. I mean, we try to be with and empathize and listen, and then sometimes, we get to, hey, you gotta suck it up, Buttercup. Let's move on.
Usually pretty short though. It's not a lengthy process.
That's true.
Like a minute.
And he's able to contain his emotion then?
Oh, he can completely be back to normal very quickly.
He returns fairly quickly. There's a brush fire, and then it's.
All right, so just if you have, a few $100 you want to get rid of, go get some testing and just see what somebody says about the ADD stuff. Let's see. I was trying to think of. Oh, that was Nashville. I thought I'd heard about somebody who's really great doing that in Birmingham, but it was Nashville. I want to learn what we're dealing with. Sort of how does he manage that impulse versus structural world? I wonder also, this is a little bit of a throwaway, but I wonder also what it would look like to treat it like, not like discipline, but more like me and my lunch at work. In other words, discipline doesn't have to be based on a crime. Discipline is what the universe does with us when we goof up, and your analogy of taxes is a good one. First time, Norman and I first got married, I got my taxes done by a guy, and I, got them from the accountant and put them in the filing cabinet. And a few months later, I got a letter from the IRS saying that I hadn't filed my taxes. And I was so confused. I called my dad. I said, "This letter said I didn't file my taxes." He goes, "Did you file them?" I said, "Yeah, they're right here in my filing cabinet." I filed them. He goes, "No, that means you file them with them, John. Mail them in to the government." Okay? So anyway, yeah, I filed them. They're right here in the filing cabinet. I don't know what the problem is. Anyway, it would be interesting to play with him about learning to remember with consequences. In other words, my having to eat lunch at the cafeteria at the hospital was not a punishment. It was a natural consequence to help me learn. And good discipline is just for learning. So I might try on something in a friendly manner and go, it's gotten to where you really forget things a lot. You want to come up with some ways to help you remember? Like, if you forget, then you don't get TV tonight, or you don't get Legos tonight, or whatever, and just see if it costs you a little bit. Put a little checkbox in your brain and help you remember. That might be interesting just to play with him, because I don't want to turn this adversarial, because it's not like, I don't feel a passive aggression. I don't feel like he's, I forgot. I feel like that he literally is struggling with it, and there's an impulse issue. So I want y'all to kind of get on the same team with that. And we're going to set up some things to where we never learn anything unless it costs us. So let's let it cost you some and see if he's on board with that and play with that some. I don't know. Just some thoughts. Okay. We need to stop on time. Sorry, gang. I'm going to be around a little bit. Y'all can talk to me afterwards. Thank you so much. I worked y'all hard, and I feel like, by Saturday, I love a parenting conference because I feel like we're on the same page. You got the model, and now we can play with the same words and the same categories, and y'all are getting it. I'm really happy for that. Use this as a framework. I want you to parent strategically, remember? So use these things with your kids and fail with these things with your kids. And use what we said about failure to be a failure with your kids and repair it with your kids. Remember, like we said last night, this is like the Bible. I told you what you need to do, but that place of rest and safety and grace to be a screw up with your kids might be the best thing you do for them. Right? Like Eric last night, who was sitting over there, and what he talked about his limitations. That's where I want us to live. Let's pray. Father, we thank you. I just called you Father. You are our Father. We are your children. And we grasp at the fringes of trying to understand what loving, powerful parenting looks like. Be our model. Mostly be our Father. I'm going to preach tomorrow on how we are your sons and daughters. Prepare our hearts for that. We are your children. You are our God. and our Father. We thank you. We worship you. I pray for all these families again as they leave, that your Spirit would be in their midst, that they would be bringing to bear in each other's hearts more likeness of Christ, in whose name we pray.